I wrote this New York Times bestselling book about ice bathing and why you should like jump into ice water. And I was sort of like the leading edge of this ice bathing trend that has taken over the world. I climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro without a shirt on. I sort of took Wim Hof from being like a charlatan into the world of being like, you know, now a very important influencer. And because there is a lot of cool science there. Yeah. But there's also a tremendous amount of hype, a tremendous amount of just bullshit. Andrew Huberman is someone I write a lot about. And I write a lot about David Sinclair and Peter Attia and these really just monumental figures in the current health space. And I look at not only what their information is and where it doesn't really check out with sort of the scientific consensus, but I also look at their own like personal histories. And there's this famous study by Susanna Soberg. Susanna Soberg is this Danish, very attractive clinical researcher, and then she did one study. She's only done like one published clinical study. It was on ice bathing. She took like 12 Danish dudes. They all swam in some ice water, and she measured stuff with a thermal camera and whatever. And at the end, she declared that ice bathing creates brown fat, and brown fat is a heat thermogenic tissue in your body that burns white fat like an oven. And unfortunately, the research around brown fat is not particularly. Her research was terrible. And then Andrew Huberman was the editor at the journal Cell Reports Medicine. He's on the editorial board. She's on the cover. And then as soon as it comes out, she's on her podcast selling her platform. Like, it's a clear collusion that goes on behind, because Andrew Huberman wants to be like, I've got the protocols, and the hot scientist who has this answer. She's spelling like, she has like an e-course and like a spa package where you can go learn how to make an ice spa. It's bizarre, man. At the root of this all is greed. Here's the question: what sponsor would he not take? You know, right. What sponsorship, if you offered Huberman $1 million, which is what I'm estimating the Roca sponsorship is worth, if you offer someone $1 million, what will he say no to? And I do not know if Huberman would say no to anything. What does it take to become ridiculously popular? What sacrifices do you have to make in your mind, and the way you use your time, and the way you think about other humans? Like, there's a lot of sacrifices on the way up to celebrity, especially internet celebrity right now. It's a very competitive space. Right. And if you're going to succeed, you have to sort of be ruthless at some point, and you shed parts of your credibility.
The episode will start in just 1 minute, but I wanted to really quickly introduce myself and what I'm trying to achieve here at The Giant Shoulder. My name is Evan, and I'm a 26-year-old neuroscience graduate, startup founder, wannabe triathlete, and now full-time content creator. My goal is to create the most engaging and accurate content about the brain possible, but I really need your help. If you've ever learned something from The Giant Shoulder or support this bootstrapped operation for neuroscience communication, then please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you could possibly know. We have huge ambitions for 2025 with even bigger guests and better production. So thank you so much and enjoy the episode. Scott Carney, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you. How did you get
Thanks.
started?
I didn't put my tie on this time. I'm sorry for not being formal.
I'll duck 5 points, but I'm sure people will forgive you. How did you get started in this business of investigating health and wellness, influencers, grifters, charlatans, whatever nice or unnice word you want to use to describe them?
Yeah, well, I've been an investigative journalist for about 20 years now, starting with mostly like foreign correspondent stuff. I was a foreign correspondent in India, covering war, covering organized crime, that sort of stuff. But one of the tangents that I was really interested in was like organ trafficking. And I wrote a book about buying and selling human body parts. I'm probably still one of the like 5 world experts on buying and selling human body parts, which is weird.
Is that a bumper sticker on your car? You have that printed out in your car?
No. I feel like if I was going to go down that route, I would have been much wealthier, and it would have been a very different car. But no, I've always been interested in medical stuff. One of actually my first stories I ever worked on was signing up for a clinical trial and being, with a bunch of professional guinea pigs whose whole job was just to jump from clinical trial to clinical trial. And it opened my eyes up to weird things in the creation of medicine, like the weird culture of medicine that we don't really talk about in the professionalization of a
Right.
certain aspect of medicine. Anyway, so I was always interested in health. And then I wrote about cults. I wrote this book called The Enlightenment Trap, about people who got caught up in this sort of crazy like ideology where you can meditate your way to superpowers. And then those two trends sort of combined until I wrote this New York Times bestselling book about ice bathing and why you should like jump into ice water. And I was sort of like the leading edge of this ice bathing trend that has taken over the world. Because if you look on my Instagram feed, I don't know, your Instagram feed might be better than mine, but mine is like a bunch of like buff dudes jumping into ice tanks.
I have a lot of it as well. A lot of that as well.
I was sort of one of the reasons why that blew up. The book was a New York Times bestseller. It was about Wim Hof largely. And I sort of was really instrumental to the rise of Wim Hof, who's like this, if you don't know who he is, don't worry about it. But he's like a famous ice bather.
Yeah.
And I did some things like I climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro without a shirt on. It was a thing. And then, and the point of that book was sort of like going from being a skeptic of things like exposure to ice and exposure to extreme elements to finding out that it actually did give me a fair amount of resilience. And I sort of took Wim Hof from being like a charlatan into the world of being like, now a very important influencer, a very like sort of like respected-ish charlatan, I guess, a respected fitness influencer. And then, so that's like a 10-year period of my life where I was like an evangelist for this ice bathing. And because there is a lot of cool science there, but there's also a tremendous amount of hype, a tremendous amount of just bullshit. And I saw Wim go from sort of a small-time eccentric guru or eccentric health influencer, I guess, to becoming a guru, becoming a cult leader.
Right.
And so then I've had this break, in the last 2 or 3 years where I'm like, all right, even if there's something cool underlying this stuff, we also have the problem of influence. And so a lot of what I'm working on these days is trying to look at the reputations and the personal histories of famous health influencers and exposing where they're lying. Like, even if someone says something cool, something interesting, and for instance, Andrew Huberman is someone I write a lot about, and I write a lot about David Sinclair and Peter Attia, and these really just monumental figures in the current health space. And I look at not only what their information is and where it doesn't really check out with sort of the scientific consensus, but I also look at their own like personal histories. And I get a lot of flack from that because a lot of people are like, I don't want to know about this guy's affairs or this guy's like financial dealings. But to me, it matters. Like, 'cause I think character is something that we've I guess the politics we're in right now. We don't care about character. You can have a political figure who's like raped people. And I'm not even talking about the one you're thinking about. I'm talking about like half of them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure.
And you're like, whatever. I like his policies. I like what I have a beer with, or whatever it is you want to say. And like, we've forgotten about character. And
it's very true.
For me, I'm exposing someone's history, factual history. It's criminal records. It's, the conversations with people who knew them for years before they got famous. People have been scammed and whatnot. And I'm putting that information out in a way to navigate the health universe that when you scroll your phone, all you hear is someone saying a 30-second clip that often is decent. Like, often it's decent or it's promising or whatever. And then you don't have context to understand it. So I'm trying to give that context. That's a long way of saying hello. It's
an awesome answer. It's an awesome answer. I think a lot of what I try to do is add context as well, but possibly only from the one lens of, does this neuroscience actually, is it backed up in peer-reviewed data? Because a lot of the information we see online, it seems like it's coming directly from a peer-reviewed, replicated data point of view, and it's just simply not. But we'll get to all of that and all the people that you spoke about there. I want to go through, because they're all people that I've listened to for many, many years. I've followed, I've believed, I've been betrayed by, whatever. We'll go to all of those. Wim Hof, how did you meet him? What was he like at the start? And what was your pull towards cold exposure?
I mean, I met him in 2013, I believe. I think that was when I arrived in Poland. He had a very small organization at that time. I was actually at this first like formal workshop, and my thesis was that he's a charlatan who has a very compelling message who's going to get people killed.
Right.
And then I tried his stuff, and it turns out that it worked. I was standing in the snow for hours. I climbed up a mountain in my skivvies. I was shirtless in Playboy. Because the articles for Playboy. Yeah.
Another thing for the bumper sticker on the car.
Exactly. That's a better bumper sticker.
Right.
And generally, he opened my eyes to the reality that, putting yourself in different hard environments does actually change your physiology, and did allow me to do cool things. And there was cool science going at the time. There was really cool science that was like beginning on ice bathing and breath work, that he was like being a guinea pig at major universities and coming up with like really promising studies. And like the way I like to think about Wim Hof studies is that it's really awesome B+ science.
Right.
Like it's like, oh, cool. This is like really interesting. Like your immune system changed because of the breath work and the ice, and we've shown it in a lab, and there's in vivo and ex vivo stuff. Cool. Very cool. But it hasn't gotten to the point where it was like A+ science, and it may never get to A+ science. And so the way I like to think about it now, and the way I talk about it, is I was like, hey, go try this stuff, go do it. The methods are interesting. If it works for you, that's cool. But you can't promise it's going to cure cancer. You can't promise it's going to cure autoimmune illness. It's not like a 1-2 punch into all health. That said, I still do it every day. So,
you get fully in the
wrap
bath.
your mind around that.
What's your exact protocol? Are you 11 minutes in with, jump out and then exactly 86 degrees in the,
that's all bullshit.
Yeah, I'm
all protocols are bullshit. All protocols are bullshit.
So what do you do then? What benefits do you believe you derive from it?
So I've been doing it for 10 years, and my practice has been evolving. So it's sort of like, when do you want to cite what I'm doing? These days, I do breath work just about every morning, where it's the Wim Hof classic, hyperventilation and breath retention, and then some push-ups. It takes about 15 minutes, maybe less. I do that every day, and I attribute that to the remission of chronic canker sores that I used to get. So up until I met Wim, I would get these like dime-sized canker sores in my mouth, like probably once every 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks. And they were horrible.
That's agonizing.
Yeah, they're terrible.
Yeah, it's really bad.
And so I started doing Wim Hof stuff, and I also changed up my toothpaste and my and I took lysine as well. All things that are good for canker sores, but the canker sores don't come back for me, and I attribute it to the breath work specifically. All the things are important, but like I notice a change. You get those prodromal feelings, like you get like, oh, there's like a little sore, doesn't hurt yet. I can do the breath work, and I can see the sore go away where it didn't when I was a kid, when I was younger, kid up to 29. And so I attribute it to the Wim Hof method. It's not a clinical study. I've met many people who've had similar-esque remissions for autoimmune illness. And the theory behind that, is that, your body is, your autoimmune stuff is like your immune system attacking itself. And with cold sores, it's probably maybe a herpes simplex of some sort that I got when I was like a baby. And then it's actually not the herpes creating the sore, it's the immune system making the sore. And essentially this breath work and the ice bathing gives your immune system something else to do. That's the best metaphor I can offer it to you. And I think actually that's about where the science is too. It's not like definitely clinically for sure this is what happens, but we seem to see an effect. I'd love $1 billion study. We're not going to get it. And so that's one thing that happens. And what I do is I do the breath work every morning. These days, I don't do ice bathing as much as I did for about 10 years. But every weekend, I do like a 10-minute ice bath with friends in between a hot tub and an ice bath. And I sauna through the winter. Like I just do stuff. But I don't have a protocol. I think protocols are dumb. I think everyone who says like this is the optimal time for something, or the optimal dosage, doesn't know what the hell they're talking about.
Right.
And oftentimes it's like a marketing gimmick more than anything else. And they're trying to like there's a macho component. Like a lot of that space is, I just don't gel with it. And yeah.
I think specific protocols just resonate more. Or they, when someone's on the other side of the screen and they hear, 11 minutes at 22 degrees and you're out for 6 minutes, having those specific numbers just alludes to data behind it, right? People are assuming that all of those numbers are calculated, but I agree that I think a lot of the benefit that you get from these things are just the psychological benefit of doing it. I've never really been able to do a cold plunge. I've done a couple, but they're just kind of too expensive for me to do on a regular basis. I grew up in Ireland, so the Irish Sea is not a bad proxy. And then I do cold showers a lot, just because cold showers undoubtedly get the adrenergic system going. The adrenaline is pumping, and I feel like going for a run, cold shower, and a coffee and a glass of orange juice is just the way I like to start my day. And psychologically, that's reinforcing. I had a problem with one of the things. I made a video about Andrew Huberman and one of his protocols, because he's gone on podcast after podcast and he talked about the dopamine benefits that you get in the brain from a cold plunge. And he was always citing this one study. And I delved into that study, and to the best of my knowledge, I couldn't find many other people that had found this, or I definitely hadn't seen people who had pointed it out. But the study he was referencing was dopamine in your peripheral nervous system. Dopamine can't cross the blood-brain barrier, so measuring dopamine in the peripheral nervous system has absolutely nothing to do with focus, motivation, energy, or anything related to that whatsoever. Dopamine in your peripheral nervous system controls peeing, which is way less epic. So the study that he was using again and again and again, and he was clearly like pushing it for focus, for concentration, for energy, just has nothing to do with that whatsoever. And I pointed that out, and I thought that was a good video to make because, the evidence that he was citing to just had nothing to do with the benefits that he was stating. But that doesn't mean that I don't think cold has benefits, and dopamine might increase in the brain. There's very specific reasons why it's very hard to measure things like dopamine in the brain. It's very hard to do uninvasively. You need to get things down into the brain, which you don't often do, and it's after the fact. So there's a lot of things that are hard to measure dopamine in the brain. But I just do it
why does it matter? Like, this is the thing that gets me is like, why does it matter that some chemical or hormone change in some sort of panel that even if you measured it accurately, and you're absolutely right, like we're not going to be dissecting ice bathers while they're immersed, right? Like that's not going to happen. But like we have fetishized data that we cannot contextualize. And I think it's a much bigger problem. I mean, Huberman is like a prime example of this type of a presentation of data. Is like it's the quantified self writ large, and he's like, well, we got data here. Functional medicine is also guilty of this. The people who believe that we can amass all of the data of the world, like any biomarker, metabolite, whatever, we can measure it, and therefore, and a lot of stuff we can measure. And let's say we had the perfect test, even though you're absolutely right, we don't. But let's say we had the perfect test. We don't know what all of it means. Yeah, we don't know how cortisol and dopamine and ghrelin and blah blah blah, all of those things together. When something moves minutely, we don't have long-term data. We have just like, shoot from the hip assumptions of what it means. And then dopamine is a marketing term as much as it is a term in medical science. Right. And there are, I mean, how many metabolites and hormones and chemicals do we have in our body? Like, do you know? I don't know.
Well, but the thing is, it's not even an equation of how many of those we have. We have hundreds of thousands of proteins. So you could even think about, so it's not just how many hormones we have, but how many proteins we have that those hormones are interacting with. The complexity of the body is not just listing out the different things, it's in the interactions between those things, which makes possible states like playing chess. It's near infinite the amount of physiological states that a human body can be in.
And we don't know how it all adds up. And I think this is like, they're trying to create a reductivist model. Like, reductionism is like the basis of science, and it's a very good method for understanding things. We can all agree controlling for variables was really cool. But when you talk about a body and when you have trillions of things interacting with each other, proteins, hormones, like whatever, DNA, transcription, like all of that stuff, we have this belief that we understand it. And now what's happening is that we have AI, which is like you put something in a box and you hope the AI has the data and can figure out what all the data means. And it can't. It's like it'll just spout out an answer that you can't fact check. And so that sounds better. And but what all of this is just a really good way to give people a sense of control over their lives. Right. So when you wear an Oura ring, and I actually stopped wearing it.
I have a Whoop and a Garmin on my wrists right now. So I'm doubling up on bio wearables and data.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wore this for years, and I feel like it didn't actually change my life in any way to see this stuff. And sometimes, like, if I was having anxiety, I could look at it and see, like, maybe my heart was not going crazy. Like, that's about the extent of it. Like, you wake up and you get a score. Like, why did you need a score for sleep? Like, we have these ideas that data is meaningful, and largely it's not. Largely, it's just a way to sell a subscription to a device, and there's a lot of money in that. And there's the hope that at some point we get to a place where the data is meaningful.
Right.
But I just don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the frustrating thing about everything that you just said is that Andrew Huberman also knows all of that is the case. And he knows that if he states his protocol and says, but actually the mechanism is a little bit nuanced here and there's a few more steps and we don't actually know if C jumps to D there, even though the more he adds that nuance and the more he adds that there's uncertainty there, the less people are going to immediately follow it and the less views the video is going to get and the less, he's going to skyrocket into fame. And I think he knows that, which is the frustrating thing, because when he's stating protocols and he's, kind of just jumbling loads of neuroscience jargon in front of you and then connecting dots and you're like, yeah, that made sense. He's like tricking you into believing that you understand what he's saying, for one, which you don't, because there's so much cloak and daggers underneath what he's saying. But he knows that the protocol and the mechanism is not perfectly worked out. He knows that there isn't peer-reviewed data behind a lot of these things. He knows that number that he just said is really not a good enough piece of evidence for him to be stating it en masse. And then we go into all of the issues of being affiliated with a $9,000 ice bathtub, which I think is just bonkers. That, like, for me, when I saw that, the thing that really blew my mind, American culture is very different to Irish culture, for one, but European culture. And one of the things is Americans love consumerism, right? They love going into debt. They love spending money. But you can take out a credit line to buy a $9,000 ice bathtub. And when I saw that, I was just mind blown. First off, you should not be spending that much money on an ice bathtub unless it is 0.00001% of your income and you can buy it right away. Nobody should be going into debt for a $9,000 ice bath. And I kind of think that it is not ethical. Now, we can have this discussion on what is ethical for health influencers to push.
My ice bath is $14,000, just so you know. I have a $14,000 ice bath, and I don't make, it's not 0.1 of my income. I mean, here's the thing about that stuff. If you feel like you're getting a benefit from it, it's not the worst thing in the world to have a thing that's like a luxury or an extravagant thing. Like, you might have a sauna, right? You're not quite in Scandinavia, but maybe you have an Irish sauna nearby, and that's also a doodad that you get that is ostensibly for your wellness. The problem is when they sell it as a definite treatment to something,
right?
When they sell as this is the solution to X, Y, or Z, and so that you don't access medical care that's actually, addresses the problem. But the other problem with America is our medical care is horrible. Like, our medical care is the worst in the world for at a developed country. And my insurance premiums up till I actually dropped insurance. Our insurance is so bad that a guy who is like, upper middle class decided that insurance wasn't worth it. And I'm raw dogging health going forward, because I was spending $700 a month and a $14,000 deductible, which means I would have to spend about $22,000 a year before insurance kicked in ever.
Absolutely blows my mind. That makes no sense to the European brain. I live in Spain. Healthcare is free. I live here. I go to the doctor for free. Everything's for free. Literally, it's one of the best healthcare systems in the world. It's a rich country, but there's a lot poorer regions and places in the US, but healthcare is just free.
Don't move to America, man. America's not the place to be at the moment, because we have this healthcare problem, and then we have the grifter problem.
Yeah.
And and we're getting in this situation now where it's like, which is like, big pharma is terrible. Big pharma is horrible. Like, big pharma is terrible. Healthcare is terrible in America. And so the wellness grifters come in like, we have the solution. And like the wellness grifters are horrible too, but they're horrible for different reasons. One's a top-down problem. And then we have this cottage industry of like people being like, yeah, I've got your solution. And all of it is crap.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for every person in America and the world who's trying to like just make rational health decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's mind-boggling and very hard to realize what's noise and what's garbage and what's actually signal, like what's useful health information. What do you think are the benefits of ice bath? What do you think is proven? What do you think there's data behind? And then I guess we can go to the second part, which is what are the claims that are just completely overblown? Where do the claims
proven?
Not
I can give that to you right away. Nothing.
Right.
Zero. Absolutely nothing is proven beyond any reasonable doubt in scientific data. All of the studies that I have seen look at some hormonal changes, some things that go up and down, usually with very small groups, usually without controls or controls that are ridiculous. Every protocol I've seen misses the boat. A lot of people who even do the studies have never even done an ice bath, so you don't even get the understanding from the researchers on what's actually going on. I have looked at the science. I've written 2 books on the science. There's some interesting stuff about brown fat that then gets debunked later. It's something that you should try. Everyone should try it, and they should see how they feel afterwards and then make it their own assessment on what they want to do after that. Because in terms of like what science can prove, well, science can't prove a lot.
Right.
And anyone who has a protocol is and an e-course, well, they have a protocol and an e-course. Like what else do we want to say? And there's this famous study by Susanna Soberg. Susanna Soberg is this Danish, very attractive clinical researcher from, I think she was at Novo Nordisk. I think, was that the one?
That sounds familiar. I watched your video. Yeah, I think so.
Right. So and then she did one study. She's only done like one published clinical study. It was on ice bathing. She took like 12 Danish dudes. They all swam in some ice water, and she measured stuff with a thermal camera and whatever. And at the end, she declared that ice bathing creates brown fat, and brown fats is the heat thermogenic tissue in your body that burns white fat like an oven. And, to heat yourself, right? So the idea is that you jump in the ice water, you activate the brown fat, you get thinner, svelter, and like your insulin gets better. And
people want brown fat. That's been a thing for a while. Going cold, get brown fat makes you thinner.
Right. And unfortunately, the research around brown fat's not particularly, her research was terrible.
Yeah.
And then not only was it terrible, her protocols are saying like, if you do the same swimming protocols that her Danish people did, then you're going to be optimal, only because that's the only thing that she studied. Second, she said that she has measured, I forget the exact number, you can go look at my video, but it's something like 800 times more energy expenditure from brown fat than anyone else had ever measured before. So, and that line is just like a throwaway line. Interestingly, this was weird. And then she goes on and says her study was great, but all of the other studies showed that brown fat didn't produce nearly as much energy. So she probably made an error. I mean, she probably just messed up a decimal somewhere, and she ran with it. And then Andrew Huberman was the editor at the journal Cell Reports Medicine. He's on the editorial board. She's on the cover. And then as soon as it comes out, she's on her podcast selling her platform. Like, it's a clear collusion that goes on behind, because Andrew Huberman wants to be like, I've got the protocols and the hot scientist who has this answer to this. And now she's selling spa treatment. She's selling like, she has like an e-course and like a spa package where you can go learn how to make an ice spa. It's bizarre, man. It's freaking bizarre. And this is the world that we live in, where we have a collusion of scientific data becoming marketing data, not for big pharma, which also does this crap, but for the cottage industry of wellness grifters.
Right. The thing that baffled me about that whole case is you're really not exaggerating how bad the study was. It was a very small sample size. As you said, I think there was like 7 people in the protocol group and like 6 people in the control. Yeah. So like that's very small. One outlier was excluded where the data didn't conform to the rest of the group, which is pretty sketchy. When you have such a small sample size and you're excluding people because the data is an outlier, that's not great. but then he goes on Joe Rogan and says that she is basically the leading expert. Like, the thing is that every single Joe Rogan listener actually is not familiar with the cold literature. But you can't expect anyone to, the cold plunge literature.
Yeah.
So everyone is immediately taking Andrew Huberman at his word there that she's a leading researcher. 100 cited papers, clearly done many, many studies, replicated again and again. Like, he can't go on a platform like Joe Rogan with his credential and his name and say that she's a leading researcher when she's just not, because she clearly isn't. The one study was very poorly designed, and you just have an army of followers now. I think she has like nearly 500,000 followers on Instagram now. Just probably
she blocked me, so I don't know. I can't follow her anymore.
I'm only blocked by Rhonda Patrick. I need to increase my grifter blocking list. I am.
Yeah.
So okay, let's move on to the next sort of Huberman claim. You recently made a video about his eyeglasses. Let's talk about blue light blockers, Roca, and that whole partnership.
Yeah, so the reason why I'm doing this stuff, is you're mentioning the ice bath. He has other sponsors like BetterHelp, which is a therapy company that is like questionable. And like, I think he has like 13 active sponsors or 14 active sponsors on his website. And the point is, and I looked at Roca, which is like a colored eyeglass you can wear at night to wind yourself down and get better sleep. Like, that's the medical claim that it's making. And I pulled out Roca because he's a professor of ophthalmology.
Right.
That's what
he's known for.
Neurobiology and ophthalmology. That's his like professorial appointment.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a subsection of neuroscience. I don't know. You're the neuroscience guy. It's not something like that. And so basically he knows about the optic nerve. He knows about the eye. He knows how stuff gets activated. And so if you're like, well, he's a neuroscientist, so him doing an ice bath, well, maybe it's not like totally his core expertise and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's okay. But like, when you're doing an eyeglass that's supposed to make you sleep, this should be the dead center of Stanford professor Andrew Huberman's expertise. Therefore, this is like his real recommendation. And
absolutely.
And what I did in the video is I looked at the history of his claims around blue light from screens. And he was sort of like not so into blue blockers over the course of time. He was like, yeah, you don't really need them. I don't think they do that much. I mean, you can use them. He wasn't like they're the worst thing in the world, never touch them.
Right.
He was not like very pro blue blocker.
Okay.
And he did a bunch of episodes, and it was cool. I'm starting to use AI now to go look at people's changing views. And there's lots of instances of him like saying anti-blue blocker things or like mediocre blue blocker things. And then I guess at the end of October, beginning of November of 2024, this year, he releases a blue blocking eyeglass that has all these medical claims about it, that makes you wind down, while the science of blue light from screens, and you've all heard this claim, right? Blue light from your screens keeps you up because it activates your sympathetic nervous system, blah, blah, blah. It turns out that is a little bit old science. Like the review articles that are out now sort of say that screens don't do that much.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I was actually still in I'm not familiar with this scientific field, so I was actually still under the illusion that blue blockers did something.
No, so the blue light will activate your body to wake up and change the melatonin flavor. And I try not to use scientific words. I try to like use metaphors because I don't know all the scientific words. I'm not a scientist. I'm a journalist. But it does change your melatonin. It can wake you up, especially like the sky. The sky's really bright. Like there's this blue light that's involved. The problem is that when you actually take a blue light from a screen, like a tablet, so an iPad, pretty big screen, change it all to white, and put a lux meter. So something that measures luminosity, it is incredibly insufficient to actually change your circadian rhythm. Even right here with a screen at night in a fully black room, the lux, so the actual like dosage of blue light, is insufficient to do anything clinically that's ever been studied.
Interesting.
And I talked to Michael Gradazar, who's actually a sleep scientist. I'm not a sleep scientist. Who did a review paper, not only doing his own research, but also looked at all of the papers on blue light that have been done to date. And so he reviewed 10 major papers, and they all agreed that you need, instead of 50 to 80 lux, which is what you get on your screen when it's like here in a dark room, you actually need 1,000 lux.
Wow.
to
So
start changing your
orders of
circadian rhythm.
magnitude off.
Yes. And so that whole theory, like it's true, blue light can change your circadian rhythm. That part is true. But the hypothesis that it's your screens fucking you up is
Right.
not true. Probably what's going on is that you're looking at your phone, right? You're looking at something, you're reading something, your brain's moving. You're supposed to be winding down because you shouldn't be looking at the computer.
Right.
Not
It's
the screen of the computer.
content rather than the brightness. You're watching crazy action or really anything, and it's the content that's waking your brain up rather than just the brightness of the screen. Because that is the commonly held belief, that it's the light coming off the screens, which is impacting your circadian rhythm, making you more alert when you want to be winding down. So it begs the question, like, what do you think the role of a health influencer in these sort of circumstances is? Like, what does how much evidence does there need to be for an ophthalmologist from Stanford to endorse a product and sell it when it's probably not doing very much? Like, it's harmless, except it's costing probably €150 or whatever it costs. I don't know how much it costs, but like,
yeah, it's such an important and good question, and I don't have an answer for you because there's a lot of interrelated problems here. One, how do you make money with a podcast? Like here's your first thing. He's actually bothering to put out a podcast and he wants to make money on it. How does a content creator make money? And you're probably struggling with it. I struggle with it.
Yeah.
Like, it is a conversation that's not yet on the health grifting side.
Yeah.
There is no good business model for social media. Not really. Like, it's sort of there, but not really. And it all spin, like, there's AdSense and there's selling out and whatnot. I have a YouTube channel. Like, I've got, I don't know, like 100,000 subscribers or something. And I am so hesitant of taking a sponsor.
Yeah.
Like, I've had 500 videos. I've never taken a sponsor. And because I feel like it undermines credibility, because once you start taking money, you start working for the sponsor. And it's funny. I'm in a conversation now where I might take a sponsor, and I'm evaluating their health claims.
I don't think you should feel bad for taking a sponsor. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's the issue, really. I think, like, creators need to be able to make money and they need to be able to take sponsors. They need to be able to take sponsors they believe in. I think you should use the product at the very least. I think that it's a problem when it's medical. That's the health information. That's the health influencer part, because there's no way it doesn't bias your information. I think people radically undervalue bias, how biased we are as people, and how that's an actual ingrained psychological mechanism, an evolutionary mechanism to make us believe what our in-group tell us and not what our out-group tell us. It makes us literally blind to information that is counterfactual. I did a whole video on that. And there's no way that doesn't happen when you're endorsing a product. And that's very complicated when you're a health influencer. But, like, take as many whatever other sponsorships as you want. I really don't think there's any problem with that.
Yeah, I think it's a complex moral thing. I'm not sure that I'm going to take this sponsor. I said I would, and then I'm like, well, maybe I won't. So, you'll see January 1st, I'm going to put out a video, or January 5th, and you'll see if there's a sponsor in it. But I'm testing out the sponsor right now, and I'm like, does it really do the claims that it says it is?
Right.
And I've been using it for 3 weeks, and I'm not actually sure it does. So then I'm going to be like, oh shit, well, what do I do when I put this out? Like, I'm wrestling with the ethics of putting in like a $2,000 sponsorship. Huberman, my feeling is he's like YOLO, and he pops on some medical stuff and just goes when the money is there. And I feel like it's a problem with the business model. It's a problem with his credibility, because he's also a Stanford professor. They make money. Why does he need infinite money? Like, at the root of this all is greed. And here's the question: what sponsor would he not take? What sponsorship, if you offered Huberman $1 million, which is what I'm estimating the Roca sponsorship is worth, if you offer someone $1 million, what will he say no to? And I do not know if Huberman would say no to anything. And I think as you get more popular, you get more demands on you, you get more opportunity, and you find reasons for why those opportunities are ethical. And I do not know a lot of people at that level who seriously consider saying no to money. And it goes hand in hand with growth in general. It's like, what does it take to become ridiculously popular? What sacrifices do you have to make in your mind and the way you use your time and the way you think about other humans? Like, there's a lot of sacrifices on the way up to celebrity, especially internet celebrity right now. It's a very competitive space.
Right.
And if you're going to succeed, you have to sort of be ruthless at some point, and you shed parts of your credibility. So there's an element of this where I think that everyone who is super famous has, like, behind every great fortune is a great crime. Like, that's just a statement that I've seen in my whole life, and I sort of like agree with it. Like, if there's someone who's really rich, be very wary of them. And but there's this question is like, as I get more popular, right? I have like 100,000 followers, not that many, but it's like still a fucking ton. I can't even imagine seeing a crowd of 100,000, like even visualizing it. At some point, like, I would like to have more so that I can have a steady income. I want a middle-class income, but I'm not aiming for millions and millions of dollars. And I think that this is not an ethic which is taught, which is understood by people. And I don't know how we get people to start wanting that, because clearly the top of the griftoverse, as I call it, right? It's all run by Rogan at the top, right? Rogan, because if you go on Rogan, you get Rogan's followers, right? And you go up and it comes down, and there's this waterfall effect where if you're on that thing, you can have a career that's made for you for life. And Huberman was made from Rogan as well. And Rogan's sort of, I guess, philosophy is just go do it, go make money, go push this stuff. He has this supplement called Alpha Brain, which he had a fake clinical trial around, and it was also bullshit. And he sold it to Unilever for $400 million. Like, it's
a fake clinical trial. I didn't hear about the fake clinical trial. I have asked many neuroscientists, are there any nootropics that work? And all of them have said no, pretty much. And they usually don't give definitive answers. I talk to neuroscientists every week, and they pretty much never, ever speak with confidence on things. They say, I don't know. But nootropics are one that pretty much all of them have said that there's just no good evidence. There's no study, I believe, that it says what they say it says. So what is up with this? What is up with the fake clinical trial on Joe Rogan?
So I did. It's actually, unfortunately, you can read it see it on my Substack. I put it behind a paywall on YouTube because YouTube demonetized it for stupid reasons. But like the gist of it was, so Alpha Brain ran a clinical trial where they had some questionnaire endpoints and they measured some stuff, and I think they were looking at, it was something like 30 data points for, did Alpha Brain increase
cognitive function,
some sort of output. I forget exactly what they were studying.
Loads of cognitive measures.
And the cognitive measures almost roundly in their own self-funded study. So in the conflicts of interest, like, we funded this shit. In their own study, it barely improved above placebo in most things. Some things that underperformed in placebo. So it actually made you dumber in their study, but like one or two things that did improve it, right? So one or two things, and they said those one or two things that were improved were the actual results, and then you can, and then we'll sell.
So they emitted a great amount of data, basically, is what they got 30 data points, 3 of them fit the narrative, and they emitted 27.
Exactly. In their marketing, in the study, you can read it and you're like, well, this is it. Your study basically says your product doesn't work. And also, if you think about statistics, the field of, right, there's always going to be a random chance when you roll the dice that some things that you measure will be randomly higher and randomly lower. Like, that is the way numbers and measuring of things works. Yeah. And so they were in that statistical variability of your 30 data points. Yes, some of them are going to be higher than others. And it was a completely worthless study. They've been sued by some class action suits in New York and things like that. I think they won the suit, but it doesn't really matter. The thing was, they did the study. Aubrey Marcus and Joe Rogan were like, we talked to the neuroscientists, the people who come on the show. And they're like, lion's mane mushrooms make your dick hard, or whatever it is that happens. And then they sold that to the audience over and over again. Supplements are a great way to make money, and because they're basically unregulated in America. And then they cashed TF out when they sold the whole company for roughly $400 million to Unilever.
It's crazy that I haven't heard about that. I don't think that's that common knowledge that he did all this with the clinical trials. It's not a narrative I've heard, and I'm quite, tightly put into those circles of, like, health grifters and people, faking clinical trials. I thought that would be in my circle of knowledge, but apparently not. But
Go check it out.
Speaking on brands, I know you've made a few of these. These never paid me, so I'm lifting up an AG1 Athletic Greens tub because I want to go there. I want to get your opinion on Athletic Greens. I paid for that for 6 months, so they're not a sponsor. I think some of it was I took it for 6 months because I do triathlon. I try and be as productive as possible, and because Huberman told me that it would fill all of my nutritional deficiencies, and that is a genuine answer. Like as a neuroscience graduate and someone who's trying to be a neuroscience communicator, I did really take a lot of what Huberman took at his word, and I was not as skeptical as I should have been. And when he was promoting these products, this was kind of before I did any of the digging into him, I was taking a lot of what he said, just, based on the confidence in which he was stating them, which was extremely confident, with 100% confidence. And the way he marketed Athletic Greens, I think I bought this through his affiliate link. So I think I don't know, out of 400, 500 euro I've spent on this, I don't know how much has gone straight into Huberman's pocket. Probably 20% of that or something.
400, 500. Yeah, 30%. Yeah.
30%, a crazy amount. Let's dive into Athletic Greens, because I know you've looked a lot into them as a company.
So greens powders are, again, another supplement that it's mostly spirulina. That's what you're getting. So I think spirulina is an algae that has antioxidants or something in it. And it's, we've seen these green powders for decades, and they are out there. You can go to like any health food store and get like a green juice shake. Right. Do they do something? Sure. Why not? Like maybe I'm not actually going to go too much into the science, because there's a lot of these powders out there. The thing about Athletic Greens that is so important, there's two things. One is that it's quite expensive. It's like $100
That's why I stopped, and I didn't have the money to start it. I just was, I actually believed him, and I was someone who really did not have the revenue coming in to be spending that much money, but I really thought it would improve. And then maybe I also thought down the line I would also get that sponsorship and it would be great and all of that, but obviously didn't work out.
Well, I mean, you still can get the sponsorship. You just need to get a little more popular. Athletic Greens' business model is basically structured like a multi-level marketing thing, is that they give you 30% of the revenue that comes in. So if it's $100 to buy a monthly subscription, the influencer is getting $30 per month. So as long as that person keeps that subscription active, it goes into their pocket. And the powder... money. Yeah, the powder is not very, they don't really list the amounts of the ingredients. It's not sure what the clinical effectiveness is, but I don't even care about that, honestly. Like, that's sort of irrelevant to me, because I think that all of the supplement research is sort of like, not so great anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't care about the dosage. What I care about is the flimflamization of the green powder, which is like, it's all marketing. It's like the guy who founded the company, Chris Ashenden, said, look, I'll give you 30% if you can shill my stuff. And the inflated price is what you're paying the influencer to lie to you about what they think the stuff does. And right. I don't think it's harmful. I don't think, like, there in California, there's a warning.
Financially, except financially, when it actually.
And cognitively, it's bad, because you're buying into flim-flam. You're giving your control over to this marketing world, and your brain is getting weaker because of it, not because of the nootropics, but because you have bought into a marketing message. And that's what I really don't like about it. And in addition, the guy who founded it, Chris Ashenden, is a convicted criminal. Like, in his past in New Zealand, he started a real estate company that was bilking poor people. The real estate company was a rent-to-own scheme. We would sell people the dream of home ownership, and they were all like poor Black people in New Zealand. And he said, you can rent from me, and eventually you'll own your home. But it was an impossible contract. It was a ridiculously fraudulent contract, and he was convicted on 44 or 54 breaches of the New Zealand Fair Trading Act. In his trial, he fled the country. He was sitting on the stand. He fled the country, moved to Arizona, and started Athletic Greens. That is the guy who founded this company.
More known? How do more people not know that story? I only learned that story from your video, which is really well done. I'll link it below. I'll link all the videos that we've talked about, obviously, down below. But that's crazy. Like Andrew Huberman never, in one time in any of his podcast shout outs of him talking about its nutritional profile and all of its value, said that the CEO is a convicted criminal.
Yeah, and they threatened to sue me. I put this information. They hired like like the biggest law firm, a defamation law firm in America, to like shut me down. They were aggressive. They were trying to defend a reputation that is undefendable because it's true. And then he got fired after my video came out. So like Scott did something small. He's still very wealthy. He has 2 houses, one in Miami, one in Medellin. He's still probably close to a billionaire. And such is the nature of health grifting. My feeling is that we have to think about character more. We have to think about who these people are. I mean, Huberman has his sex scandals. Attia has similar things. Sinclair has similar things. Like, they're all sort of different, but they're all sort of similar too, where you look at these people, like, these guys are bad people. They have a history of being bad people. Why are we letting them dictate protocols, health things, to issue their mind space on us, and so that we deliver them cash to reward unethical behavior? That's the problem here.
Right. At the very least, it has to be on the checklist of, do I accept this sponsor? Have they committed any crimes? You have to wonder if Huberman did that check at all on who was running the company at that time, or because obviously it's incredibly important. That person sets the culture of the company. If they've been known to cut corners in the past, who knows what they're putting in these proprietary blends? That also really frustrates me about what a proprietary blend is. It basically means that they can shroud this. All they're selling is an ingredient list, and they can shroud it in sort of mystery. That's all very frustrating. What about David Sinclair? Because
longevity. Yeah.
David Sinclair is an interesting one, because I had only heard about him peripherally as being Harvard longevity guy. I had only heard positive things. And it really speaks to this idea that most of these grifters are only known to people not for the misinformation they spread, but for being these beacons of hope. The amount of times I say to people that I'm making a video on like Gary Brecka or something, and they're like, "Oh, I love Gary," and I'm like, "No, don't love Gary. He's like the worst. He sells like €100,000 health kits. Do not love him."
Yeah.
But the amount of misinformation that gets spread is like 100 times more than me and you can push back on. There's just because so many people are clipping it, reposting it, and it's simple, it's quick, it's fast. But yeah.
Well, let's not even talk about David Sinclair first. Let's talk about the field of longevity science. Like, when somebody is a longevity doctor or a researcher, what is actually going on? The underlying preposition, the idea behind longevity research, as it's couched now, is that aging is a disease.
Right.
Okay. What parallel universe did we just get into? Like, aging, which is I was born and then I grow up, I get older, and then one day I die. That is a disease. That is, unfortunately, a statement of faith that instead of being an organism that goes through a life cycle, the life cycle itself is a disease. And they can intervene with it so that you can become theoretically immortal. If you just fix all of the things that make you age, the stuff that occurs over time, that you can fix that by intervening. And it is a grift as old as written literature in humanity. Goes back to Gilgamesh, which is the first freaking real document that we have in language that was preserved, which is basically the quest for immortality. The Egyptians, same thing. Chinese, the alchemists, all the way up to now, we have people selling the same idea, which is that we can alleviate suffering with technology or magic or, the things that they tried. And it is just a reincarnation of that age-old myth. I do not buy the very central idea that you can live forever. And if you talk to David Sinclair or Matt Caberline or these people who are in the longevity space, they will all tell you something to the effect of like, people said we could never go to the moon, and then we got to the moon. And therefore, why do you think that longevity science can't be real? Well, okay, but just because something hasn't happened in the past, what they're saying is that it can happen in the future. That to me is a logical fallacy. I feel like the field of longevity science needs to progress to a point where they have results that make you live longer based on their pathways or whatever hypothesis that they have, and they test it before they make the health claim. And instead, they're leading with the health claim. And the entire freaking field, as far as I'm concerned, is complete and utter waste of time, mental resources by everyone. And David Sinclair just happens to be a great and profitable grifter who sold the idea that red wine, or the component of red wine called resveratrol, will make you live longer because of a botched experiment he ran in 1999 that was never repeated, but he still managed to sell his product to GlaxoSmithKline for $780 million. This is the problem. Like they're selling the idea. We have a problem, aging and suffering, and I have the thing, the pill, that will fix the problem. I promise. And that
if I could push back on that just a bit,
sure.
because so immortality is obviously a grift. If you're promising immortality, that's clearly a scam. But I think a lot, or certainly some of the field of longevity, you mentioned Peter Attia a few times. He is someone that I would still generally in this moment hold to a pretty high regard in terms of the information that he provides. I think he's saying, like, look, live a little better and you can probably extend your life, both quality and quality, by about 5 years. To me, that's what longevity is. Like, can I get from 85 to 90 and be feeling like I'm 60 the whole way through until pneumonia takes me and I crack at 90? To me, that's what at least some of the longevity proponents are going towards. Aerobic exercise, cardiovascular, all of those things that have been shown to be correlated with just extending lifespan rather than immortality. I don't often hear people say, like, the promise is immortality. That's clearly a scam and a grift, but we can extend our lives in meaningful ways. And
but that's not longevity science. And this is where you're, I understand what you're saying. I agree that we all want to live healthy until we die. We want to flatten the curve, as Attia says. Like, that's a great, again, the problem we all agree on. That's great. They're offering this thing. Does Attia offer something that produces that result? And the answer is we don't have the data. And the data that he's saying is the stuff that he's actually like, oh yeah, exercise and eating healthy, like that ain't new. Like that is not like revolutionary. That is not longevity science. That's not like if Attia was like, if you just wash your hands more, you'd get fewer like stomach infections. Yeah. Okay, cool. You're not that smart. Like that. We've been saying that since Lister. Like, okay. And they're presenting either mundane, ordinary, standard baseline medical practice that we've known for a long time as a hack. And it ain't a hack. And then when we talk about the chemicals that they submit, metformin or resveratrol or NMN or blah, 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 all that stuff, now they're entering into a faith-based idea because, one, we do not have the data. We have some mice that might run faster, might not run faster, and it depends on when you're cutting the film.
I'll post that on the screen. That's crazy. To your point, Sinclair makes bizarre claims and absurdly bizarre claims, like the one where he's working with organoids that are thinking. Like, that's crazy. Like, to give organoids are a very cool thing. They are an experimental paradigm. I got to use them in the lab. They're really cool. They can do interesting things. Something you definitely can't say about them is that they think, or at least you can't say that for sure. They might do, but who knows? I don't know how someone knows that. He said they dream. He says that they do loads of things. That's clearly bonkers. He said that he extended dogs' lives by 10 years. Like, clearly crazy bonkers behavior. And he is selling supplements on the back of that, products on the back of that. He is selling protocols. I wanted to go to one of the things that he sells because it's interesting that a company reached out to me about NMN powders. I've never taken this. They reached out to me and they were so eager to give me their product that we didn't come up with any contract. There's no money. They didn't pay me. They just sent me it. And it's a €700 kit. It's sat in my drawer for 6 months because I don't know what to do with it. But this is NMN powder, and I know that you have a little bit to say about NMN powder. And I only remember that I have
Did you take it?
No, I haven't taken it. It's just sat in my drawer.
Take it right now. Let's see if you levitate.
See if I ignite into flames. Like, I was, the reason that I didn't make that video is I told them that, okay, you can send it to me, but I'm not saying anything positive that I don't experience. And then I had the second thoughts of, I don't want to accidentally say something positive that's a placebo and someone spends €700 on a kit. Because I know it's not worth €700. That's my point. Is like, I can't ethically, like, I would only be happy with someone doing that if they're worth tens of millions. But I know that there'll be people that are just scraping by that might see that and buy that, and I can't be a part of that, even though the affiliate on that was very nice, but that was one that I just clearly was like, I cannot do that.
Yeah, I don't think you should. I don't think you should ever shill a product or a supplement or ever for your career, because obviously the ability to be suggestible by taking a thing, it doesn't matter what it is. The placebo effect is like, it's funny. I was studying. I just did a corrections video on it's coming out like in the next week about errors that I've made, and I was talking about the placebo effect and how powerful do you think the placebo effect is for, say, the appendicitis, uncomplicated appendicitis, so you have appendicitis, you report to the doctor, and you have the option of placeboing sugar pill or amoxicillin or whatever is the
antibiotic.
Correct
it is,
antibiotic for what do you think it is?
Maybe 40% more effective.
Okay, so the placebo effect on that was 68% effective. No, the placebo. Now I'm messing it up. I think it was like 50% was the placebo effect, as in you will recover, and then 68% was the active antibiotic. So the antibiotic was only marginally 18% more effective,
right,
than the placebo.
Yeah,
that is a huge philosophical issue,
right,
with medicine. Period.
Yeah,
what is medicine? What are we doing with medicine? And we should really try to figure out what medicine is, because I thought before I looked that stuff up was that the antibiotic would be like 3%, and the placebo would be like 3%, and the antibiotic was going to be like 80 or 90, and like I was just dead wrong. And actually, you should actually have the Cochrane Institute, Cochrane Research in Edinburgh, I believe. Does great placebo research, and you should go talk to them.
Placebo is so fascinating. I did a video on the placebo effect where I think it was a group. You had a control group and a placebo group for knee injuries, and half of the group went through an actual surgery to repair knee injury, and the rest of them were just given anesthetic and didn't undergo any surgery, and the placebo group recovered faster than the actual surgical group. So that's not just
they had an
pill.
incision. Both groups had incisions on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it was minimally invasive, but I can't, but both groups thought they underwent the knife, and then the placebo group literally recovered faster from their physical knee injury than the ones that went through surgery. So people think that the placebo group is limited to your painkillers being 10% more effective or whatever it is, but it's literally bones repairing. Like that's how far it extends. The power of the mind is insane and impossible to quantify.
Right. And we also generally attribute, if you take an intervention of anything, we generally attribute the intervention to the cure, that the outcome that happens. Right. And so we're like, oh, I did a thing, therefore the outcome that happens is because of that thing I did. And oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it's the natural course of the body, or the belief that you did the thing, or lots of psychological and just general physiological processes. And so medicine needs to go really figure that shit out at a clinical level. And there's no reason that the pharmaceutical industry has any incentive to develop a better placebo. Like, okay, well, let's say we did know what the natural course of disease was without intervention. Like, you can't really do this data, because obviously you're like, well, you have strep throat. We're going to wait for you to die or recover on your own to do that data. That's not very ethical. But if you did do that data and you had created a robust data set of what the natural course of healing is, and we have some from the 1800s actually, but like in general, we don't have that data. And then you could start comparing, okay, well, now we're going to do sham trials of like sauna or ice bath or breath work or meditation or prayer or whatever. Then you could actually create a data set to try to understand different placebos. Yeah. And then you could then try to figure out how a medication works on top of all of that stuff. And you could have a really interesting intellectual exercise, but we don't have that data. Like medicine doesn't have that data. So now we're talking about NMN. So this all comes back to what you were doing. You might take this, the company says we have $700 of NMN. One, you don't even know if it is NMN, because how do you know what an NMN looks like? Two, you take it, and if they send this out to 50 influencers, and the placebo effect on a product is between 30 and 70%, like that's a range. then the 30% of people who said, this didn't do anything for me, okay, they're out. But you still have the 30% of people who said yes, and then they just syndicate, and they believe it. They fully believe it in their bodies that it is true. And then they're selling essentially misinformation. And this is why we cannot do affiliate marketing models for medical interventions as influencers.
Extremely hard. Have you ever heard of the Hawthorne effect? This is relevant to placebos. I think this you'd be interested in this. So like the Hawthorne effect is sort of an extension of placebo, where by undergoing an intervention, because of the physical act of like doing something for a certain amount of time or something dramatic happening. So like getting IV fluids is a good example of the Hawthorne intervention, where it just works a lot more than you would think it would, because you get some fancy dramatic thing that's wheeled into the room. It's hooked into your arm. There's a lot of evidence that a lot of the benefit of that is simply the intervention. So to go back to AG1, I really liked getting up in the morning and getting my really nicely marketed bottle that made me feel like Andrew Huberman, and kind of pouring it in and putting my water in and kind of feeling like a healthy guy while drinking it out of that's all Hawthorne effect. But that's having so much psychological benefit of me just going through that process every single morning. I really liked it as part of my morning routine.
Sure.
But, like, that doesn't need to cost €80 a month. It's impossible to things apart.
And especially if there's a hormetic side to it. If you take the thing and it's hard to do, ice bath, right? In the morning, you're actually, I'm doing this thing. There's a sacrifice involved. And that also will, Hawthorne effect. You could also call this hormesis. You could also call this, there's the adherence effect, which is, I guess, a relative of the Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effect sounds like it's the dramatic side of it. The adherence effect is like, I just do a protocol every day, and the more I adhere to it, and they've studied this too, the more you adhere to a protocol, the more complex the protocol, the more likely you get the better outcome, regardless of the effectiveness of the intervention. And they've shown that with like cardiac stuff, like, I don't know, stuff. And all of this stuff, these medical interventions are actually, at a philosophical level, really important to understand, because human health, like we all benefit from the placebo effect. And we should understand it. And we should probably honestly be taking more placebos. Like, we should probably be like, I have an issue. Like they did the GI track, right? Where you had irritable bowel syndrome. And they said that this was out of Harvard. And I think it was Benson's research, but it might be someone else. It was out of Harvard. And the idea, they said you have irritable bowel syndrome, which is a clinically diagnosed irritable bowel. And then they said, we're going to give you a placebo. And this does not do anything, but it will fix your bowels. Okay. Literally what they sold them. And they also had a control group of like whatever the medicine was. And they found that the people who took the known placebos improved.
Yeah, it still works. So I remember reading that before. Telling someone this won't work still works.
And so I think that if we did have a sort of medicine that really engaged with placebo research, and the Cochrane Institute, you should really talk to them because they're amazing.
I will.
You actually have the ability to modulate that and improve. And I think that my book, The Wedge, was sort of about different placebos, talking about them and the psychological components. And I haven't really promoted that book because it came out on the first day of COVID. And I didn't want people to believe that the placebos that I was looking at would cure COVID. And I had the opportunity to be the biggest health grifter ever. And I was like, I can't do it. And I pulled back. The book's done fine, but not like the amazing find it would have done.
I'll link it below. Everyone go read The Wedge. I'm sure it's brilliant.
And so what was I saying? The problem is grifting. The problem is that we know the placebo effect works, and they have these companies, whether it's the expensive ice bath or the green powder slurry, or maybe metformin, all of these things that you might take, and they promise that it might work, and then you actually do get a benefit, but and that whole pathway is then connected to giving a personality money at the top of that YouTube channel. Like at the end of the day, it's about giving Andrew Huberman is healing you because you listen to Huberman, you like Huberman.
Right.
And I think that's where we have this corruption that occurs in the world. And I don't know how to totally combat it.
Right.
And if you are taking AG1 and you do feel like your life is getting better, and you also feel like the money is not a big deal, I don't really have a leg to stand on to say, well, don't do it anymore because you had a cool... It's really complex.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to dissuade people from doing things that they have the financial means to do and they feel psychological benefit to do it. But it is important to point out that the marketing tricks or what they say aren't exactly what they say they are. And I'll continue to point that out, and then always have the asterisk of, but I'm not here to change behavior. I just want to point out science and correct science. Like, I don't care about anything else. But you gave me an idea. I might just start filling this with random green powders, or getting my girlfriend to fill this at random green powders and see how I feel. You know, she can just go to the shop and buy anything that's like tastes bland, and I'll see if that has the same benefits. Scott, this has been so much fun.
Spirulina's like $5 a pound. Like, it's, you know, go for it. It's like, it's really not expensive.
Really high protein as well. Yeah. This has been so much fun. Let's leave the audience with, if there's people or a fad, so anyone that we haven't mentioned here, or any health trend that you really think there's a lot of misinformation out there at the moment, and it maybe is causing some harm, who or what would you draw attention to in the close of this, what's been a really engaging conversation, I think?
I think that we're on the verge. So we just had this new presidential election going on in the United States.
I might have heard of that.
Yeah. Some guy just got, I don't know, he had like orange skin or something. Anyway, he's going to be president. And I think that we're sort of entering into a world where misinformation is going to be bigger, not only because of the administration, right? It's actually because of also the culture of consuming misinformation and active disinformation from literal propaganda machines run by state actors, whether it is Russia, China, Iran, United States, probably Ireland. Like, you know, probably everyone has their own disinformation.
Everyone else but us. We're the good guys. We're not harming anyone. We're not harming anyone.
But everyone has their own like reason to change what we feel of as reality. And it's going to be very, very difficult for us to even parse that out in the next 4 years out of America. But, you know, I don't really know your political information ecosystem in Ireland, but I think we're going to have to be triply wary of how we get information in the future, because it's now going to be official channels in the United States where we're elevating health grifterism to the idea of like food is medicine, to that they're going to alter the paradigm completely. And I have mixed feelings about this, because on one hand, big pharma is freaking evil. Like big pharma is a large corporate money grubbing, doesn't really care about our health. I mean, the caring about your health is like their afterthought. It's really about controlling all health decisions. And yes, my healthcare is shitty, and yours is too if you're an American. All right. And also, the health grifters are now being empowered by the administration here, so that the flim flam and this sort of like false placebo effect will be everywhere. And in the most optimistic view of this, it's going to be good. Like if you just cast away the problems with these people's personalities, the system does need to be shaken up, and maybe they're going to fix some stuff. On the other hand, they're going to probably undermine really good and established science in favor of grifty approaches. And the biggest, most obvious one would be vaccines. I don't understand why biohackers, this whole biohacker world wasn't like, vaccines are the best, because I inject myself with a thing and it challenges my immune system, and the immune system is like, cool, I learned something and now I'm immune to that disease. Like from the just the basic biohacking idea, it seems like the vaccines would be the best thing you could ever do. And we have now live in a world where bizarrely they are not considered healthy. I think by a large number of people.
Someone was telling them to do it. It's the anti-authority approach. It shows how irrational they are. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just because somebody is telling them and forcing them to do it that they have an issue with it.
Yeah. And that's true. Like, and there's that cultural component. Like, I also hated wearing masks. Like, I also think that you could reinvestigate, you could like actually consider some of the contrarian things that other camp, we call them the anti-science camp. Some of the things, their complaints are actually legit. Like, I don't know, could it have been a lab leak? Like, I look at the evidence, I'm like, yeah, it seems like possible. I mean, I'm not going to rule things out, but we've become so polarized in where we are that we start thinking in these groups, and we think that one side thinks something, therefore I can't think that. And I think we need to shake up those groups really seriously and try not to be just fit into one or two categories. And And part of that's also going to be not to like attack everyone online.
Right.
Except for me, I can attack people because I
You're
will
allowed.
attack.
You have to like. You're only Scott Carney is allowed.
Only I'm allowed to attack people. But like that's not true.
No,
Obviously,
I understand your point. I understand your point, and I agree with everything. But I'm not optimistic about the next 4 years because you just have the biggest unifying leader who's just come in, and he isn't polarizing at all, and he loves bringing people together, and he's very happy-go-lucky, and he just appointed the anti-vax king of the world who just talks so much nonsense. It's crazy. So we'll see how RFK works out in that position. He's like the health minister now. I have no idea. I don't follow. It's crazy. I am anyway.
yeah, same,
Scott, this
it would be like the health minister in Ireland. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. Anyone who wants to look at my stuff, just go to my YouTube and there's YouTube stuff.
I'll link everything below. It's been such a pleasure. You do very important work, as you said. For grifterism is on the rise, so we need the only problem is we need about 100 of you, and that would still not counter even 1% of probably the misinformation. But you're doing very good work. I couldn't recommend people go check out your stuff more, and I'm excited to keep in touch and keep following your content. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you.